The morning sun spilled over Chicago's South Loop, painting the streets in gold. Brood Awakening, a small coffee shop wedged between glassy office towers, buzzed with life. The scent of fresh coffee mingled with the hum of conversation, hip-hop beats drifting in from a street performer outside. Zoe Carter, a 30-year-old black woman, sat at a corner table, her worn notebook open before her. Her faded jeans and plain white t-shirt didn't turn heads. Her braided hair, pulled into a loose ponytail, framed a face free of makeup, her eyes sharp with focus as she scribbled notes. To the casual observer, she was just another face in the crowd, maybe a student, maybe a freelancer, scraping by in a city that didn't slow down. Across the shop, a group of young professionals claimed a larger table, their laptops and sleek portfolios spread out like a battlefield. Ethan Brooks, 32, white, in a tailored blazer, typed furiously, his cufflinks catching the light. Sarah Mitchell, 29, white, in a silk dress, scrolled through her phone, her manicured nails clicking. Jake Larson, 31, white, in a crisp polo, leaned back, laughing at Ethan's joke. They were prepping for a high-stakes pitch at Unity Media, a Chicago firm searching for a new community program manager. Their voices, sharp and confident, cut through the shop's warmth like a cold breeze. Sarah's eyes flicked toward Zoe, then back to Ethan. "Look at her," she whispered, smirking. "Writing in a notebook. What is this, high school?" Ethan chuckled, his voice carrying. "Probably applying for the barista gig." Jake grinned, adjusting his polo. "Bet she's here to clean up after we leave." Their laughter stung, a quiet jab that echoed in the shop. A few customers glanced over, some smirking, others looking away. Zoe kept writing, her pen steady, her face calm, as if the words were a passing breeze. The group didn't notice her stillness, too wrapped up in their own world. Miguel, a 20-something Latino barista in a green apron, set a tray of iced lattes on their table. Sarah shifted, her elbow accidentally knocking a cup over. It hit Zoe's table with a sharp clatter, spilling cold coffee across her notebook. The dark liquid soaked the pages, smearing her neat handwriting, and dripped onto her jeans, staining the faded denim. Sarah covered her mouth, her eyes wide with mock horror. "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry," she said, her voice dripping with insincerity. "Hope that wasn't anything important." Ethan leaned back, smirking. "Probably just her grocery list. Mop floor, wipe tables." The group erupted in laughter, louder now. Phones lifted subtly, snapping photos or videos of Zoe's drenched notebook. A few customers whispered, their eyes darting to the scene. Miguel froze, a rag in his hand, caught between stepping in and staying out of it. Zoe closed her notebook, wiped her hands on her jeans, and looked at Sarah. Her eyes were steady, unflinching, holding a quiet strength. "It's okay," Zoe said softly, her voice calm but firm. "Accidents happen." Sarah rolled her eyes, whispering to Jake. "She's probably just here for the free Wi-Fi." Jake nodded, his polo stretching as he leaned forward. "Doesn't look like she's got anywhere important to be." Miguel stepped closer, offering Zoe his rag. "You good, ma'am?" he asked, his voice low. Zoe nodded, a small smile on her lips. "I'm fine, thanks." She wiped her notebook, her movements slow and deliberate, as if the spill was just a minor inconvenience. The group kept whispering, their portfolios gleaming with logos and charts, their confidence a wall that blocked out anyone who didn't fit their mold. To them, Zoe was invisible, a nobody who didn't belong in their world of ambition and privilege. But Zoe wasn't invisible. She was Zoe Carter, the woman who'd spent years building community programs in Chicago's toughest neighborhoods. Her notebook wasn't filled with grocery lists or diary entries. It held plans for Unity Media's next big initiative, a project to bridge the city's racial divides through youth mentorship and job training. She'd been named the new community program manager just days ago, a role she'd earned through late nights and tireless work, not through flashy resumes or designer clothes. Today, she was here to observe the candidates vying to join her team, to see who had the heart to work for change, not just the polish to talk about it. The group didn't know any of this. They saw her dark skin, her simple clothes, her lack of status symbols, and made their assumptions. To them, she was a stereotype, a black woman who couldn't possibly belong in their world. Their laughter grew louder, their barbs sharper, as they fed off each other's arrogance. A woman in a pencil skirt, her hair in a tight bun, glanced at Zoe's notebook and snorted. Handwritten notes. Who even does that anymore? A man in a pinstripe suit, his watch gleaming, muttered to his neighbor, "She's probably here to take our lunch orders." Their words were a net, trying to trap Zoe in their prejudice, but she didn't flinch. She opened her notebook again, her pen moving across a smudged page, jotting down names and observations. Her face betrayed nothing, no anger, no embarrassment, just a quiet focus that the group was too blind to notice. They were too busy building their own egos, unaware that the woman they mocked held their futures in her hands. As the group packed up, their laptops snapping shut, Ethan waved to Miguel. "Get her another coffee, would you?" he said, smirking. "Might help her nerves." Miguel hesitated, his eyes flicking to Zoe, then back to Ethan. He nodded and set another cup beside her, careful not to spill it. Zoe thanked him with a nod, her calm unshaken. The group gathered their things, their laughter trailing as they headed for Unity Media's office, confident they'd dominate the pitch. Zoe watched them go, her notebook closing with a soft thud. She wasn't here to compete with them. She was here to judge them. And they'd just made their first mistake. Zoe stood in Unity Media's sleek conference room, her damp notebook in hand, as the group's laughter echoed around her, unaware that their biggest mistake was underestimating the quiet woman they mocked. The 12th floor of Unity Media's downtown office was a study in modern wealth. Glass walls framed a conference room where Chicago's skyline sparkled under the midday sun. A long mahogany table dominated the space, surrounded by plush chairs that cost more than most people's rent. A massive digital screen hung on one wall, dark but ready to display the candidates' polished presentations. The air smelled of polished wood and faint cologne, a sharp contrast to the coffee shop's warmth. Ethan, Sarah, Jake, and a handful of others, dressed in designer clothes, their resumes gleaming like trophies, set up their laptops, their voices buzzing with confidence. They were here to pitch for the community program manager role, a position that could launch their careers into the stratosphere. Zoe slipped into the room, her damp notebook clutched in one hand, her coffee-stained jeans clinging to her legs. Her sneakers were silent on the thick carpet as she took a seat at the table's far end. The others barely noticed her. When they did, their glances were fleeting, laced with pity or disdain. To them, she was a clerical error, maybe an intern who'd wandered into the wrong room. Her plain t-shirt and lack of jewelry only confirmed their assumptions. In their world, power wore blazers and cufflinks, not faded denim. Ethan leaned toward Sarah, his cufflinks catching the light. "What's she doing here?" he whispered, smirking. "Taking minutes for the janitor?" Sarah laughed softly, her silk dress rustling. "She's probably lost. This isn't the community center." A woman in a pencil skirt, her hair pulled into a severe bun, glanced at Zoe's notebook and snorted. "Handwritten notes. Who even does that anymore?" Jake adjusted his tie, grinning. "Bet she's here to hand out coffee." Their laughter was a quiet blade, slicing through the room's hum. Zoe opened her notebook, her pen moving across a smudged page. She didn't react, her face a mask of calm focus. The group's arrogance filled the space, their resumes a fortress of privilege. They'd spent years climbing corporate ladders, networking at elite events, building LinkedIn profiles that screamed success. To them, Zoe was a nobody, a black woman who didn't belong in their polished world. The truth was far different. Zoe Carter had spent a decade working in Chicago's South Side, building programs that pulled kids out of gangs and into classrooms. Her mentorship network had slashed crime rates and created jobs, saving the city millions. She'd done it quietly, without fanfare, her name rarely in the headlines. But Unity Media's board knew her work. They'd chosen her as their new community program manager, not for her polish but for her results. Today, she was here to evaluate the candidates, to see who had the vision to join her mission. Her notebook wasn't a diary, it was a record of her observations, a tool to decide who'd stand beside her and who'd fall. The group didn't know this. They saw her dark skin, her simple clothes, and made their snap judgments. To them, she was a stereotype, someone to mock rather than respect. Their whispers grew bolder, their barbs sharper. A man in a pinstripe suit, his watch gleaming, muttered to his neighbor, "She looks like she's here to take lunch orders." A woman with a pearl necklace, her portfolio embossed with gold, leaned toward Ethan. "Someone should tell her this isn't the mailroom." Their laughter was a living thing, wrapping around Zoe like a net. But she sat still, her hands folded, her gaze fixed on the blank screen at the room's front. Her calm was a shield, her silence a weapon they didn't understand. They were too busy feeding their egos, oblivious to the power sitting quietly at the table's end. The door swung open, cutting through the room's hum. Angela Davis, a 50-year-old black woman in a sharp blazer, stepped in. As Unity's head of community outreach, her presence was electric, her authority absolute. The candidates straightened, their smiles tightening, their phones disappearing into pockets. Angela's eyes swept the room, taking in the gleaming resumes, the designer clothes, the nervous energy crackling like static. Then they landed on Zoe, and her expression softened for a moment, a flicker of recognition no one else caught. "Good afternoon," Angela said, her voice firm but warm. "Before we begin, I have a question." She turned to Zoe, her gaze steady. "Zoe, you okay? Did someone spill coffee on you?" The room froze. Sarah's smile vanished, her fingers tightening on her pen. Ethan's jaw clenched, his cufflinks dull. Jake shifted, his polo suddenly too warm. Zoe nodded, her voice soft but clear, carrying a quiet strength. "I'm fine, Angela," she said. "Just a little coffee. No big deal." Angela nodded slowly, her eyes narrowing as she faced the group. "Thank you for showing your true colors," she said, each word a measured strike. "But none of you are pitching today." The group gasped. Sarah's portfolio slipped from her hands, hitting the table with a soft thud. Ethan's face paled, his blazer sagging. Jake stared, his tie askew, his mouth open but silent. The air grew heavy, the candidate's confidence crumbling like sand. Angela tapped her tablet, and the screen lit up with a photo, Zoe at a Southside community event, shaking hands with city leaders, her smile radiant. The image was a silent rebuke to the group's prejudice. The conference room's silence was deafening, the candidate's confidence shattered by Angela's words. The massive screen glowed with Zoe Carter's photo, her presence larger than life. She stood in a Chicago community center, surrounded by teens, her work credited with transforming lives. The candidates stared, their resumes forgotten, their egos in tatters. Sarah's hands shook, her silk dress creased. Ethan's cufflinks, once a symbol of his status, seemed dull. Jake's polo clung to him, his earlier smirk gone. The woman in the pencil skirt removed her glasses, her portfolio crumpling. The man in the pinstriped suit gripped his watch, his knuckles white. Angela's voice cut through the stillness, steady and unyielding. "The person running this meeting is Zoe Carter," she said. "Our new community program manager." The words hit like a thunderclap. Sarah's breath hitched, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Ethan stared at the table, his jaw tight. Jake's mouth opened and closed, no sound escaping. The woman with the pearl necklace sat frozen, her embossed portfolio untouched. The room's earlier laughter was gone, replaced by a suffocating stillness, the weight of their misjudgment pressing down like gravity. Zoe stood, her movements unhurried, her damp notebook in hand. Her coffee-stained jeans and plain t-shirt contrasted sharply with the room's opulence, but her presence filled the space. She opened her notebook, pointing to a list of names written in her neat, steady hand. "This is a list of people I won't work with," she said, her voice low but clear, each word deliberate. "Not because they lack skills, but because they lack respect." Her gaze landed on Sarah, whose face had gone from confident glow to crumbling horror. "You judged me before you knew me," Zoe said, her eyes unwavering. "That's not how we build a better Chicago." Sarah sank into her chair, her hands trembling, her silk dress a wrinkled mess. Ethan stared at the floor, his cufflinks forgotten, his ego a pile of ash. Jake shifted uncomfortably, his polo damp with sweat. The other candidates looked away, their resumes now meaningless, their dreams of Unity Media slipping through their fingers. Zoe's story wasn't in her clothes or her notebook stains. It was in her work, 10 years of building bridges in Chicago's toughest neighborhoods. She'd created mentorship programs that pulled kids out of violence, job initiatives that gave families hope. Her name wasn't on billboards, but it was known in community centers, in schools, in homes where her programs had changed lives. Unity Media had chosen her not for her polish but for her impact, a truth the candidates had been too blind to see. Angela stepped forward, her blazer sharp, her authority absolute. Zoe's been shaping this city's future for years, she said. She built the programs that saved millions and connected thousands. Today, she wanted to see who'd join her mission. You just showed her who you are. The candidates sat frozen, their eyes darting to the screen, to Zoe, to each other. The woman in the pencil skirt whispered, "We didn't even see her." The man in the pinstriped suit loosened his tie, his watch a reminder of his failure. The woman with the pearl necklace stared at her portfolio, her earlier sneer replaced by a blank stare. Zoe closed her notebook, the sound sharp in the quiet room. "I came here to find people worthy of working beside me," she said. "You disqualified yourselves." She walked toward the door, her sneakers silent on the carpet, her damp jeans swaying with each step. She didn't look back. The candidates remained still, their world upended in minutes. Angela tapped her tablet, the screen going dark. "This meeting's over," she said, her voice final. "You'll hear from us if we need you." She followed Zoe out, her heels clicking on the polished floor, leaving the room in stunned silence. Sarah sank deeper into her chair, her hands covering her face, her earlier confidence shattered. Ethan stuffed his resume into his briefcase, his cufflinks scratching the leather, his movements jerky. Jake stood, his polo wrinkled, his eyes distant. The woman in the pencil skirt gathered her things, her glasses in her hand, whispering, "How did we miss this?" The story of that day spread through Unity Media like wildfire, not through press releases but through whispers in cubicles, emails between staff, conversations in the sleek cafeteria. It wasn't about the coffee spill or the laughter, it was about Zoe Carter, the woman who'd built the company's community programs from the ground up and now held its future. The candidates' names faded, their resumes discarded, their arrogance a cautionary tale for those who remained. Outside, Zoe stepped into the elevator, the glass walls revealing Chicago's skyline as it descended. Her jeans were still damp, the coffee's stickiness clinging to her skin, but she didn't care. She'd come to the meeting not to prove herself, she'd done that years ago, in late-night planning sessions, in community centers where her ideas had saved lives. She'd come to test the company she now led, to see who'd stand beside her in her mission to unite a divided city. The elevator hummed, a soft counterpoint to the chaos she'd left behind. Her notebook rested in her hand, its pages warped but intact, a record of her power. A week later, the South Side Community Center was alive with energy. Kids dribbled basketballs outside, their laughter mixing with the beat of a street drummer. A crowd gathered in the parking lot, their signs bold and bright, "Equality Now. Chicago United." Zoe stood on a makeshift stage, her damp notebook gone, replaced by a microphone. Her jeans and t-shirt had been swapped for a simple blazer, but her braided hair and steady eyes were the same. The crowd, black, white, Latino, young, old, watched her, their faces full of hope. Zoe hadn't spent the week dwelling on the coffee shop or the conference room. She'd been working, meeting with community leaders, expanding her mentorship programs, planning job fairs. Her role at Unity Media wasn't just a title, it was a chance to reshape Chicago, to bridge its racial divides through action, not words. But today, she wasn't just managing. She was speaking out, her voice a beacon for a city ready for change. "I've been judged my whole life," Zoe said, her voice carrying over the crowd. "For my skin, my clothes, my roots. People see me and think they know me. But I didn't come here to hide. I came to build something real, for all of us." The crowd cheered, their signs waving like flags. A teenager, Malik, 17, black, filmed on his phone, the video streaming live to social media. It was going viral, hashtags like hashtag Zoe's Peaks and hashtag Chicago United trending across platforms. Comments flooded in, "She's our hero. This is what leadership looks like." Malik grinned, his phone steady, knowing he was capturing history. Zoe gripped the microphone, her voice rising. "We don't win by tearing each other down. We win by lifting each other up. Let's make a Chicago where everyone's seen, everyone's heard, no matter their skin or their story." The crowd roared, their voices a wave of unity. Miguel, the barista from Brood Awakening, stood at the back, clapping, his green apron swapped for a t-shirt. He'd seen Zoe's strength that day in the coffee shop, when she'd faced the group's mockery with quiet dignity. Now, he saw it magnified, inspiring a city to rise above its divides. Back at Unity Media, the conference room's fallout lingered. Sarah, Ethan, and Jake stood in the lobby, their portfolios packed away, their dreams of joining the company shattered. Sarah's eyes were red, her silk dress creased, her confidence gone. "I thought she was nothing," she whispered, her voice trembling. Ethan shook his head, his blazer wrinkled. "We didn't see her," he said, his cufflinks catching the light one last time. Jake stuffed his polo into his bag, his voice low. "She's changing everything. And we're out." They walked out, the glass doors closing behind them, their footsteps heavy. Zoe's story spread through the company, whispered in hallways, shared in emails. It wasn't about the spilled coffee or the laughter, it was about the woman who'd built a better Chicago from the shadows and now led it into the light. Her programs were already expanding, connecting communities, creating jobs, proving that change wasn't a slogan, it was work. The rally grew louder, the crowd's energy electric. Zoe stepped off the stage, shaking hands, hugging kids, listening to their stories. A grandmother in a bright headscarf thanked her for the job fair that had hired her son. A teenager showed her a scholarship application she'd helped him complete. Zoe listened, her notebook now a mental one, cataloging every face, every story. This was her Chicago, not the skyscrapers or the boardrooms, but the people fighting for a better tomorrow. Malik's video hit 1 million views by evening, sparking calls for change across the city. Social media buzzed with Zoe's speech, strangers sharing her words, vowing to fight prejudice in their own lives. A local news station picked up the story, calling Zoe Chicago's quiet revolutionary. But Zoe didn't watch the news or check her phone. She was too busy planning the next step, more programs, more connections, more ways to make her city whole. The Chicago skyline glowed under a twilight sky, its lights flickering like stars. Zoe stood on the community center's roof, her notebook in hand, its pages dry but stained with coffee. The city sprawled below, its beauty a mix of chaos and hope. She wasn't thinking about the coffee shop, the spilled latte, or the conference room's stunned silence. She was thinking about the work ahead, expanding mentorships, launching job programs, uniting a city fractured by prejudice. Her phone buzzed with notifications. Malik's video had hit 2 million views, trending nationwide with hashtags like #Zoe'sPeaks and #EndRacism. Comments poured in, "She's changing the game. Chicago needs her." Downstairs, the rally had ended, but the crowd lingered, their voices soft but hopeful. Signs leaned against walls, "Respect for all," and "Equality now." Zoe's words had lit a fire, not just in the South Side but across Chicago. People shared her speech online, promising to challenge racism in their schools, workplaces, neighborhoods. A group of teens started a petition for more community programs, inspired by Zoe's vision. A local church planned a unity march, her name on their lips. Zoe opened her notebook, flipping to a fresh page. She wrote one word, "forward." That was her mission, not to dwell on the past, but to build a future where no one was judged by their skin, their clothes, or their roots. She'd faced racism her whole life, stares on buses, whispers in stores, assumptions like the ones in that coffee shop. But she'd never let it define her. She'd defined herself through her work, through the kids she'd mentored, the families she'd helped, the city she'd shaped. Her story wasn't just about the coffee spill or the conference room. It was about resilience, about standing tall when others tried to push you down. Zoe had walked into Unity Media knowing who she was, a black woman who'd built programs that changed lives, a leader who didn't need a blazer or cufflinks to prove her worth. She'd faced the candidates' prejudice with quiet strength, letting their own actions expose their flaws. Her notebook, stained but intact, held the truth: power didn't need a spotlight. It thrived in the steady hand that wrote the future. Back at Unity Media, the conference room stood empty, its mahogany table polished, its chairs neatly aligned. The candidates, Sarah, Ethan, Jake, were gone, their names fading from the company's memory. Sarah's social media grew quiet, her posts rare, her confidence eroded by the lesson she'd learned. Ethan's LinkedIn updates stopped, his ambition humbled by his mistake. Jake took a job elsewhere, his polo a reminder of the day he'd misjudged a titan. The woman in the pencil skirt rewrote her resume, her glasses no longer a badge of superiority. The man in the pinstriped suit loosened his tie, his watch a symbol of a failure he couldn't shake. Zoe's leadership rippled through Unity Media, changing its culture. Meetings grew more respectful, assumptions were questioned, egos checked. Her programs flourished, connecting communities, creating opportunities, proving that equality wasn't a buzzword, it was a way of life. Miguel, the barista, kept working at Brood Awakening, but he carried Zoe's story with him, sharing it with customers, a quiet tribute to the woman who'd shown him what strength looked like. The moral of Zoe's story wasn't in the coffee spill or the candidate's humiliation. It was in her refusal to bow, her choice to rise, her vision of a world where respect trumped prejudice. She taught Chicago, and anyone who heard her story, that real power doesn't shout or strut. It walks quietly, builds steadily, and changes everything. Racism thrives in snap judgments, in whispers and smirks, but it crumbles when faced with truth. Zoe's truth was her work, her heart, her unyielding belief that every person deserves to be seen, not for their skin, but for who they are. As the city's lights twinkled below, Zoe closed her notebook, the sound soft but final. She didn't need the world's applause. She had her mission, her city, her people. The rally signs, the viral video, the trending hashtags, they were ripples of a larger wave, one she'd started years ago in community centers and now carried forward as a leader. Chicago was changing, not because of one speech, but because of one woman who refused to be invisible. The moral lesson was clear: stand against racism, because every person deserves respect, no matter their appearance or origin. Zoe's story wasn't just a moment, it was a movement, a call to build a world where no one is judged before they're known. Her legacy lived in the kids she mentored, the jobs she created, the city she united. And as she stood on that roof, the wind carrying the city's pulse, Zoe knew the work was just beginning.